Hi, everyone. This is Z with Unlocking Greatness Podcast, or I should say Unlocking Greatness Podcast with Zenja Glass. I want to jump into talking about cast your nets. And you probably already know what I'm going to be referring to in Luke chapter 5. The reason I want to talk about this, I always think about, okay, what's going on in my life and how can whatever's going on in my life help those who listen. I believe many of us have tried things in the past, and in some way or another, maybe it wasn't as successful as we wanted, or we feel we failed in it, or whatever. It didn't get off the ground or whatever. And I believe many of us, including myself, there's times when God is telling us to try again or do it again, and we're slowly stepping into it, but we're a little bit afraid. And, I could just be speaking for myself, but I believe that happens sometimes. The second thing that I believe, the reason why I want to talk about cast your nets is, when I was reading Luke chapter 5, I thought about, wow, not only do we need to not be afraid to cast our nets and to try again, we got to be prepared. We have to actually be prepared for the overflow and for the blessings that God is going to put into our lives. And I've got a lot to say on that one. So let me start with the premise of trying again. I love the story in Luke chapter 5. Now, I already know, especially for some of the biblical scholars, they're going to say, Z, Luke chapter 5 is about the calling of the first disciples. That was the whole premise of it. Well, I understand that was the premise, but let's talk about what happened. So I'm just going to read through it a little bit, and you guys can follow along. It says, one day as Jesus was standing by the lake of, I know I'm pronouncing this wrong, Gennesaret, with the people crowding around him and listening to the word of God, he saw at the water's edge 2 boats left there by the fishermen who were washing their nets. Now, just so you know, when you're washing your nets, you're pretty much done. It's a wrap for the day, or for the night, I should say. He got into one of the boats, the one belonging to Simon, and asked him to put out a little from shore. Then he sat down and taught the people from the boat. Okay, so nothing wrong with that. When he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, "Put out into deep water and let down the nets for a catch." Simon answered, "Master, we've worked hard all night and haven't caught anything. But because you say so, I'll let down the nets." When they had done so, they caught such a large number of fish that their nets began to break. So they signaled their partners in the other boat to come and help them. And they came and filled both boats so full that they began to sink. Can you imagine that? The overflow was so heavy. It was such an enormous amount of blessings that they couldn't even contain it or handle it. When Simon Peter saw this, he fell at his knees and said, "Go away from me, Lord, I'm a sinful man." For he and all his companions were astonished at the catch of fish they had taken. And so were James and John, the son of Zebedee, Simon's partners. Then Jesus said to Simon, "Don't be afraid. From now on, you will catch men." So they pulled their boats up on shore, left everything, and followed them. Now, I want to talk about the middle part of this passage. I wanted to read the whole thing because I didn't want any biblical scholars thinking, like, you got to read it all the way to the end to make sure this is about, going out and making disciples and helping people come to know Christ. So now that we all have that out in the open, let's talk about what happened. These men, especially Simon Peter, these men were what we would now call expert fishermen. They knew what they were doing. They're out there fishing and all night and didn't catch a single thing. So imagine this guy coming along and telling them, basically, cast your net out again. Go out there into the deep waters and cast it again. So you're not only going, this is just how I see things in my life. You're not only going to try it again, but you're going to go all in. Go into the deep water. And I thank God for their obedience, because obviously he said, hey, because you say so, we'll let down the nets. I just want you to know, from some of the Bible classes that I'm in, one of the teachers and leaders of the group talked about this. He said, you guys got to realize it's not an easy thing when you've washed the nets to get all that back prepared again and to throw it back out there again. It's like a major ordeal. So I thought that was really fascinating. That's just a little nugget I want to throw in. And that, for me, because I always like to relate things to my life, means that sometimes it won't be as convenient to try something again that you considered yourself having done and it wasn't successful. Sometimes it's going to take, washing that net and getting it back out there again. And it may not even make sense, but we have to obey and do what God has told us to do. Let me deviate a second with this, because I have to talk about what God is putting in my heart. I remember The second time I started up my staffing agency, and I say second because it's a long story with that. I won't even go into detail, but let's just say a couple years ago, I started up another division. And I was going through an extremely dark time in my life. I've talked about a lot of that in the previous podcast. I won't go into detail, but I'll just say everything that could go down the drain went down the drain, and I went through a horrible, horrible time. I'm talking in my marriage, my family, with my kids, finances, you name it, everything. And I remember when God whispered in my ear and told me, this is what I want you to do. And I says, oh God, but I don't want to do that again, God. You already see how that turned out, and I don't want to go down that road again. And God whispered in my ear, now it's time for you to start it again. And I literally was going door to door to companies trying to get accounts. I didn't have a single account. And I remember pulling up to the office space, the building that my firm is in now. And I just distinctly remember I didn't even think I'd have enough money to afford it. I mean, it was just crazy. I had absolutely nothing going on to warrant getting another division off the ground. And here I am setting up a reception area, setting up an interview room, buying furniture from used furniture stores, and doing whatever I could do with a little bit of money I had just to get it situated. Only because I heard God, a word from him, I felt an unction in my spirit of, now it's time to try again. So there I was building without really having anything in front of me to show that, okay, I'm building it for this. I just had to walk in faith. Now, if you've listened to some of my other podcasts, you'll already know that entire story. I'm trying to give the shortest version, but it kind of reminds me of, man, when he says to go out there and cast your nets again, to go out there into the deep water, that was going into deep water for me because I knew that I had limited resources, but I had to obey what he told me to do. And I won't go into much more detail after that other than saying he completely overflowed my cup and blessed it. And thank God I listened when he told me to, because just as I was getting established without a single account, I have to keep saying that, didn't have a single penny coming in, God began to allow the rain to just pour in and blessed it immensely. So getting back to this is, when he told them to go out there and do it again, and they're saying we've been trying all night. Imagine the faith that it takes when you've tried something and you've not been successful at it, or it didn't end the way you wanted it to end, and you don't even want to go back down that path again, but God is whispering something sweet in your ear and saying, I want you to cast your net out on deep waters. So you're sitting there like, okay, I just cleaned these nets. I'm tired. I'm hungry. I've been working all this time, all these years, or, in Simon's case, all that night, and I ain't caught a single thing. And now you telling me to dedicate more time and resources into what I can call a failure. Does that make sense? I don't know. Sometimes when I read the Bible, it jumps out at me in different ways. So that's one part of it. The fact that they listened and obeyed. Here's the second piece that really jumps out to me, that touches my heart so much. They were not even really prepared for the blessings that God gave them. I truly believe that when we walk in faith, we have to believe and know that God is going to bless it, and we have to get prepared for it before it even comes. And I prayed a lot before doing this broadcast, and I said, God, what is it that you want me to say today? Like, what is it that you want me to speak to your people? And he just put a gentleness in my spirit and reminded me, Z, remember when you had to get prepared before you saw what was coming? I have people out there that need to get prepared for what I'm about to give them. They're still looking at what didn't work out. They need to start getting prepared. I know they've washed their nets, but they need to throw it back out there again. And they need to start getting prepared. So I'm not trying to act like I'm some minister, some prophetess, some, whatever, because I get caught all kind of things in my comment section, and I don't go by titles, and so I'm not, I'm prophesying that I'm staying in my lane, and my lane is I'm just speaking what God has put in my heart. And in my heart and in my life, from my experiences and my examples, God has placed in my spirit just to share my story of how you have to get prepared for what's to come. And I just believe for me, this is not me trying to prophesy over the world. I believe for me and for many of you, this is a season where there's going to be a downpour and we need to get prepared. That's what I believe in my heart. So what's amazing is their nets began to break. Their nets were not even strong enough. They had to call another boat over to help. That's what blows me away, is that they listened and did what he said, but I don't even know, and I don't want to overstep my boundaries, how much faith they had in terms of just the level in which God would bless them. Otherwise, they would have done it and had a couple more boats come with them. Think about that for a moment. So I want to encourage you with this, especially for those who are worried about financial things, because that's probably, I don't know, easily 60 or so % of some of the comments I get in with things being tough financially. And I've so been down that road. Listen to my other podcasts for those who are new, and you'll know I understand. My goodness. God knows where the resources are at. Let that marinate for a second. Jesus so simply told them to cast that net out, and there were so many fish they couldn't even haul it back in. Had to get another boat to help. The nets began to break. He knows where the resources are at. That reminds me of, and I know you guys have read it before, in Matthew, is it chapter 17, when they were talking about the temple tax? So Matthew 17, you guys can read it on your own, verse 24 through, what is that, like 27? And I don't want to read all through it, but basically, when Jesus and his disciples arrived in Capernaum, there was some discussion about basically paying taxes. And I just love how Jesus answered it. Jesus said to him, I'm reading in verse 27, but so that we may not offend them, go to the lake and throw out your line. Take the first fish you catch, open its mouth, and you will find a 4 drachma coin. Take it and give it to them for my tax and for yours, and yours. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. Jesus said, this is when Peter, came around. Go out there to the lake, throw your line, and the first fish you catch, when it opens its mouth, you're going to find a coin inside. I can't even comment on that. That's almost like a scavenger hunt or something. Like, this is not what some people would call prosperity gospel. This doesn't fall into that kind of a category. But I just want to say this. Oh my goodness, there's so many stories I wish I can tell. I'm trying to kind of watch my time. I've been in so many situations where I didn't know how I was going to make it. So many situations where I just had no idea where my next dime would come from. And I'm talking way beyond the years when my mother and I and my sister and brother were homeless. I'm thinking through situations where I literally did not know how I was going to make it or take care of my family. And I just remember so many things that God put in my heart and showed me that I didn't even know. I won't go into all the details, but one time he placed it in my heart. I was in my car crying. I was just going through a very, very bad financial time. And I'm like, Lord, how am I going to make it? What am I going to do? How am I going to take care of my kids? And literally God just put in my heart, go home. I want you to go in your closet. And I literally went home and went in my closet. And I won't go into all the details, but he placed in my heart something that I forgot that I even had in terms of like a policy that I was able to cash out and get some sort of a cash value to be able to help my family. I mean, I had forgot all about it. It had been some policy I had for many, many years ago. I didn't even know what a cash value was at that point. But when I tell you, when I walked in there and the letter from the company was just sitting right there, like in a pile of bills, to be quite honest with you, I can give you so many examples where God just simply pointed me to that fish that had the coin in its mouth. We really don't have to sit and worry about how we're going to make it or what we're going to do, or, Lord, how you're going to provide and this and that. We just have to be with him in his presence and allow him to point us and show us. I don't think that, and I want to use my words carefully, so I don't want to say I don't think it matters to God, but I don't think our circumstances have anything to do with him directing us and showing us what we need to do. And let me explain that. They had been out fishing all night and caught nothing. And you notice when they said that to, when Simon said that to Jesus, at least the Bible doesn't reference Jesus saying like, man, really, what happened? Why didn't you catch any fish? It's almost like Jesus like, whatever, go out there in the deep water and cast the net again. He knew where the blessings were at. He needed to see where they walk in obedience. I mean, I just read the story about, when Simon or whoever it was, freaking out about, taxes. And I mean, I just can't believe this story where he just says, look, the first fish you catch is going to have a coin in his mouth. Go pay our taxes with that. And that just made me think, and I hadn't planned on talking about this, but that just took me back to that moment when I was in a really, really bad situation, and God just immediately put in my heart, you know what? Go home. You have a policy there that you've forgotten about for years. There's a cash value on it for you. And as simple as that may sound, I'm sorry I'm crying. You guys know I'll cry in a minute. When you're in a tough situation and you see God pull you out of it and you see him do what I call the impossible, you just learn to be so grateful. Just so grateful when he's turned everything around for you. So I just pray that my little stories are somewhat of a blessing for you all, just to encourage you. Please don't give up. Please do not be afraid to cast your nets again. Don't be afraid to throw your nets back out there, and this time in really deep water. If God is telling you to do something, if he's putting an unction in your spirit to try this, do this, I want you to do this again or do that, please don't sit and talk yourself out of why it won't work because it didn't work all those other times. Or God, what sense does it make to cast my line and look for the first fish and it's going to have a coin in his mouth? You do what he tells you to do. Just like he told me to walk my butt into the building where my office is now, and I knew I didn't have money to pay the rent up in there. And he specifically directed me, this is what you need to do. So I just want to encourage you all, walk in obedience. That's it. Walk in obedience. Do not be afraid to cast your nets again. And this time, cast your nets in deep water. Do exactly what God is telling you to do. Now, before I close out, because I can already see some of the comments saying, but Z, I don't know what God is telling me to do. That's what I'm trying to figure out. I would say spend time in meditation and prayer. Dive into some of the stories that I've just referenced, or read whatever story is going to work for you, and sit in silence and ask God, Lord, please speak to me. Father, please speak to me. I'm your servant. Show me what I must do. That's it. And you sit in expectation and wait for him to answer you. Okay. I love you all. Again, this is Z with Unlocking. I got to get used to saying this is Unlocking Greatness Podcast with Zenja Glass, because that's actually what it's called. But anyway, this is Unlocking Greatness Podcast with Zenja Glass. I'm Z. I pray that you've been inspired and encouraged by this. And remember, do not be afraid to cast your nets again. Okay. Love you all. Bye-bye. Hello, everyone. Thanks for listening. This is Z with Unlocking Greatness Podcast. Please don't forget to hit the like, subscribe, and the notification button. Love you all. Bye-bye.